Expansion can be amazing, but it's got to be built with purpose. You need to be hitting basically a level. You got to be bumping up against the ceiling within your practice where you see a constraint. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Physician Growth Accelerator, a show where we break down your private medical practice vitals into systems, give you the tools to diagnose root cause of what may be restricting your growth, and prescribe what to do about it. I'm your host, Zed Williamson, and I believe that every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. I believe this because as a business owner, it gives us freedom to look at something and say, this outcome that we're getting, whether I like it or not, is the perfect outcome of a system that I am purposely running or operating. That gives you freedom to understand that if you want a different outcome, all you need to do is figure out what it is that you have to tweak about the system. So today we're talking about practice expansion. Let's, charge ahead, growth at all costs. Let's open some more locations. Has this thought ever happened to you? Sometimes it comes up for a couple different reasons. So sometimes you're sitting there and you're going, man, it would be cool to have other locations. It's a dangerous thought, but it comes up. So we're going to tuck it away for a second and I'll come back to it. Other times you feel like there's something holding you back and you're thinking maybe there's a constraint around your single location or however many locations now, and that you would increase capacity by going to another location. And when I say constraint, let's actually define that for you real quick. So if I were to push you underwater, let's say 5, 6, 7 feet, and give you a bunch of big McDonald's straws connected together, you'd be able to breathe if they were long enough to get outside of the water, obviously. But if I replaced any of those straws with a coffee straw, there'd be a problem. And that's because what I did is I added constraint. And it doesn't matter if I added constraint to the top straw, to the bottom, to one in the middle, it affects the entire system. And that's why we look at private medical practice vitals. These are the different aspects of the system. And if there's constraint within any of them, it affects the entire system. And as I said before, every system is perfectly designed to get the result that it gets. So let's go back to this idea of expansion. What I want you to be able to walk away with today by the end of the episode is, instead of just a specific belief that more locations equal good, I'm not saying that's not true. It just may not be true for you. I want you to think about or have this belief by the end of today's episode that you're actually seeing a little bit more clearly, I should say. You're actually understanding what are the signs that you're headed in the right direction. Sometimes in business, and especially in healthcare, because you are very busy, you are juggling patient care along with thinking about how to grow, how to expand, how to keep that moat around your practice so you can stay independent. And so what can happen is you can feel like you're running a race, but you're looking at your feet. That's a dangerous way to run. And so by the end of today's episode, I want your chin to be lifted a bit, looking a little bit far out in the future and understanding what can you recognize that would be signs that you should or should not expand with multiple locations. So let's dive into the first thing I said that maybe is a little bit of a scary thought. More locations equal cool. I get it. It kind of feels like you're putting your mark on different territories. I'm getting bigger. We got more locations. Anytime that is a driving force behind your decision, you have to create some pause for yourself. You have to stand back and say, wait a second. Let me slow down, slow my roll. Here's why. The brain, built with bias and heuristics, wants us to stay comfortable, wants us to stay feeling good about the things we think and do. And so there's this thing called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is this idea that any kind of new information, if it doesn't support what we've already emotionally decided, we tend to ignore it. If it does support what we've emotionally decided on, we're really good at focusing on it. You'll notice this in conversations with spouses or friends, where once they have an idea, they can find all kinds of proof as to why it's the greatest idea ever. And you might be thinking to yourself, but you're ignoring this really clear, logical fact. That's confirmation bias. It happens to you just as much as other people. So when you go down the path of expansion, of let's create more locations, if it's built on this idea that it would be cool, that you would actually like the feeling of having more locations, keep in mind that confirmation bias could potentially steer you in the wrong direction. So I'm just asking that you step back and build a business case for it. Ugh, business case. That sounds really exciting, Zed. I'm going to try to make it simple for you. So one thing to look at is your current capacity, meaning how much of your current existing practice with its single location or however many locations you have is operating at full capacity. And so what equals capacity? Here's a mistake that a lot of us do is we go to one measurable, one specific thing. And maybe for you, it's procedures. Oh, I could do a lot more procedures. Okay. What equals a lot more procedures? That means new patient visits. That means maybe diagnostic visits. That means maybe post-op visits. That means more phone calls. That means more collections. What is the true capacity of your growth? And what I'd probably suggest looking at is how much capacity do you have in your current scenario that is going unused? Because if you haven't maximized your existing capacity, then opening a new location will actually reduce your total capacity. How the heck is that possible? Well, I've seen this happen multiple times, where someone opens a new location, maybe in the same metro or city area as their existing one, but it's in a different part of town. And maybe there's some good data to support the idea, like, well, they're being underserved in that market. We get patients from that area. And maybe you're getting feedback from people in medical device or pharma that, man, it would be great if someone had a location there. But the problem is there's not enough business or patients to justify adding a physician. So it's you. So now you're taking capacity away from your current location to drive to a new location to see patients there. But think how long it took for you to build up your existing practice. When you open this new location, I'm sorry, it's not if you build it, they will come. It's when you build it, no one cares. And so now you're scheduling time away from your existing location at a new spot that probably doesn't have as many patients. So you increased your cost, you reduced your overall capacity to see patients and do treatments, and that's not a good equation. So does that mean it never makes sense to expand? Of course not. Expansion can be amazing, but it's got to be built with purpose. You need to be hitting basically a level. You got to be bumping up against the ceiling within your practice where you see a constraint. You see that coffee straw within your practice and you go, man, this coffee straw is because we need another location. And now that expansion, a separate location, can mean an explosion of business. So here's what you want to look for. Are you maximizing the revenue potential of your current practice and your time spent? If the answer is yes, then you might look for another location with another physician or a provider that can at least get you there, maybe an extender. But if you're not maximizing your current capacity, it rarely makes sense to go into a new location. Sometimes that's tough to hear because it's an exciting feeling. And I want you to think forward to the day where you're driving, let's say 40 minutes, there's traffic, so now it's 50 minutes. You're going to a location that's probably slightly understaffed because you're trying to keep costs down. You have a couple patient appointments, 2 of them no-show, and then you're driving 45 minutes back, and you feel like that day was kind of a waste. If you put that in your mind now, that'll help overcome your confirmation bias and help you truly build the business case around expanding. If we think about the practice vitals as it relates to the constraints within your office, if you were to go to physiciangrowthaccelerator.com, click on vitals, and you can click a button that says check my vitals, it'll also give you an idea if you're in a position for expansion. If you're positive on the first 4 or 5 vitals and your challenges are towards the end, expansion probably makes sense. And so it's an easy way for you to just get an idea. If you're currently in this position where it's like, thanks, Zed, but sure wish you would have told me this 6 months ago, because you're doing that 45-minute drive to a relatively empty office, realize that you are operating a system that is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So you can't just keep doing what you're doing. Look at the practice. What is it truly missing? And then specifically attack those individual things. Think of them as coffee straws. You got to get them out of the system. You got to remove that constraint so that you can get back to breathing. That might be thinking about new patients differently. That might be thinking about the type of patient, making sure ideal patients are the focus. It might be maybe reducing the schedule at that new location until you've gotten capacity at your original location. It might mean shutting it down for a bit. We need to watch out for confirmation bias. Sometimes it's helpful. A lot of times it keeps us going down a path that might have been better for us to pivot from. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your practice and when you're thinking about expansion. Always feel free to visit physiciangrowthaccelerator.com. Click on Vitals to check your vitals to see where your practice stands. And also always feel free to reach out to us with questions. We'll see you again on the Physician Growth Accelerator podcast. Bye.